Talk Radio, TNT.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. I'm Patrick Henningsen, your host. It's great to have you with us here on this Wednesday. And as I said before the break, we'll be covering a couple of big stories internationally here. Of course, the Sevastopol attack in Crimea by Ukraine and NATO, killing civilians on the beach. A war crime, massive war crime. I mean, there should be charges at the ICC for this. But will there be? Who knows? We'll talk about the ICC. We'll talk about Sevastopol. We'll talk about Russia's latest foray there with The Hague. They're trying to drag a few more high-ranking Russian officials in there. Also, the Julian Assange case. Let me bring on to the program right now, independent researcher and journalist Freddie Ponton joining us from France. Freddie, great to have you with us. And as I said yesterday, it's not often we get good news. It's just so depressing and down. But to see Julian Assange hugging his wife, walking free, I mean, this is incredible. It's a bittersweet victory, though, plea bargaining with the U.S. government. But just the fact that he's out of a maximum security prison alongside terrorists and serial killers, where his health was suffering badly, Freddie, I think this is something I'm very happy to see, despite the plea bargain. Your thoughts on the Assange latest?
Yes, Patrick, excellent news. I'm like pretty much everybody around the world delighted with the news. You know, any freedom of speech lover alike really will be delighted for this news. Of course, as you said, it's a bittersweet kind of news because it comes with a guilty plea, which was coerced literally out of the defense of Julian Assange. But at this stage, after almost 40 years passing behind bars, I think you really want to do whatever it takes to get the man out, because I don't think he had another 6 months in him, to be honest with you. So to see him out, the way he did it, and the amount of support, all the team that has never let him down. I mean, this is an incredible story, and that's something that will be, staying with a long time as part of the story of journalism, because he didn't fight only for himself or for the truth, but I think he really fought for journalism, what he believes in and what he's entitled to say under the law. And I think that is very important, although, as we all saw, the government forced him in this kind of a guilty plea to say that he was guilty of spying against the United States. All that is absolutely unfounded, but yeah, he's out. It's interesting to see that his lawyers didn't want him to place that plea on the U.S. continental space, but wanted to do that in a more Commonwealth Pacific settings, making sure that, at least he has some kind of a way out should they change their minds. So that was part of the letter sent to the prosecutor's office on Monday and was basically negotiated. And it's good to see that earlier this morning he was able to place his guilty plea and get out of there. So it's all good. It's good to see him with his family, reunited with his friends. And of course, we all impatient to hear his first official statements. I simply hope that he's not going to go declaring that he's not guilty. I don't think it's in his best interest, because he will be perjuring himself, since he was placed under oath at the federal court in Saipan. So he really wants to keep that for himself. And there is now a time to rebuild, and we need to give the guys the space. I think he really need that amount of space, and I think he wants that. So yes, I'm very, very happy to see that. Although, as I say, I will never accept the fact that he was guilty, simply because there is enough precedent in the legal context in the United States with the Pentagon Papers, the case, the United States versus the Washington Post and the New York Post, the New York Times stories are very explicit about the freedom of speech, the freedom for any publishers or journalists. Doesn't matter how he acquired the information. He has no literally criminal or civil liability for revealing that information. It's very clear since 1987. So this has been a precedent. This has been a common practice in the United States. The real question is why Julian Assange was was treated differently? And that is the real question here. My personal view, as I said, is this was not a case against Julian Assange itself. This was a very strong warning from the United States as far as don't get involved with our business, our dirty laundry. If you get too close, we'll come after you and we'll punish you and we'll make an example of you. And that is absolutely disgusting as far as I'm concerned, but I'm happy to see him out, of course.
Yeah, and it's great to see Stella Assange. You could see on the video there hugging her husband. He'll be able to see his children who are, growing up while he's been incarcerated and under arbitrary detention before that at the Ecuadorian embassy, before he was rendered out by British police in an act of international, a breach of international law, extraordinary rendition, crossing into Ecuadorian territory to basically kidnap somebody who had asylum. And so it's a bit of a stitch up. That's another scandal. So it's very regrettable what's happened, but you know that his health was flagging badly while he was in Belmarsh prison. So how long would he survive? They made a calculated move here. Of course, we can speculate about the timing, Freddie, with the U.S. election. I certainly think this might come up in the debate tonight. I would not be surprised if it does come up in the debate and Biden is doing a victory lap over Trump's indictment of Assange, then you know what this timing is all about. So we'll put that off to the side. We'll wait and see what's happening. This will be in a few hours. You'll have the Trump-Biden debate, or it's coming up. I think it's tonight. So it's going to be really soon. So that's one thing. I mean, the other thing, you made some good points there, Freddie, as well. It does not raise to the bar of the Espionage Act, not even close. Preconditions, Freddie, there's no gagging order on him. He can speak freely. He can say what he wants. I would think also his legal team, I hope, would appeal the initial charges to possibly get those to be dropped, because it doesn't stand under law or any precedent as far as you mentioned there as well, Freddie. So I think it's important to establish this legally, because if this plea stands, it does mean the U.S. government can go after other journalists. They might get knocked back in the Supreme Court later, but as it stands now, they still retain that power that they can hold someone under duress, effectively arbitrary detention, torture, holding somebody unconvicted for years on end, and then force them to do a plea bargain to save their life. I mean, it's outrageous, Freddie. Go ahead.
Yeah, the whole thing is outrageous. I mean, there's no other word to describe what he had to go through, what his family had to go through. This, as I say, there's no ground, but you have to be very careful, just to go back to the perjury aspect. When you place under oath in a federal court, even if you don't have any gag order, it doesn't matter. You'll be considered as perjuring yourself because you say that you were guilty. So he's got to be careful with that. I don't think there's nothing in them for doing that. There's if they want to basically re-engage in an appeal and, of course, open a new course of justice, then that's up to them to do that. But doing it in a proper manner so that it's not effective. Although I really doubt that the Australian government will be in any way inclined to release him to the United States authority after what he went through. So, look, I think it's a happy time for now for him, for his family, for all of us that have believed in what he's doing, that have supported him in our own ways, for all along. And I think that again, journalism needs to not be intimidated by these kind of actions. We cannot take that as an intimidation. We're all journalists, whether we're independent or not. It's irrelevant. What matters is we have to protect our source. We need to be able, because we live, that's how journalists work. We live through our sources. We develop these sources in different environments, different circles, whether the diplomatic circle, whether the law enforcement circle, military circle. We all have these kind of sources, and we use them in time to assess, in time to, for example, to make sure we understand properly what's going on, and sometimes to expose when it's needed.
Yeah, for instance, with this flexibility of application of the law or the Espionage Act or whatever, what's to stop them from, going after Seymour Hersh because he says he has sources. Take the Nord Stream pipeline story, for example. His sources, potentially high-ranking or in government, they might fall foul of the Official Secrets Act or something like this. It depends how much they want to press, because before that was not prosecutable. But there's no rules anymore. It seems like the only rule is who has power and who doesn't. Freddie.
Yeah, that's absolutely what it is. And I think, and I spend, countless hours in looking on how these things are going down, how this is legally possible, and what is the oversight over that, and we can clearly see today that the judicial system in the United States is completely corrupt, and people have to really fear for their rights. Their constitutional rights is under attack, and has been under attack for a very long time. And so any investigation we put our finger in, we can clearly see that there are ways the United States uses to get to you one way or the others. And it's really across the spectrums. These are rogue actors, which promoting democracy around the world, when clearly democracy is not, even and doesn't apply on the United States soil. And in the case of Julian Assange, this is a clear breach of fundamental right for journalists to use sources and reveal. And as I say, the way he gathered that information is absolutely irrelevant, because it must be deemed, and it's deemed of public interest. And from the moment it's deemed of public interest, which I believe what Julian Assange has more than qualified as far as something that interested the public on that particular instance, he should have been let alone. But this was a political move. This was an aggressive move from the United States. And it's a warning. It's clear warning about don't get involved with intelligence operation. Don't get involved with, all the rugged stuff we do out there around the world. You don't want to talk about what we're doing, do your journalism, talk about little politics and domestic issues, but don't get involved in covert operations or dirty business, because we'll come for you. And that really, I hope there is going to be an appeal further down the line that's going to really, look into what happened over the past 14 years and whether this was legal or not.
Yeah, I mean, the main argument against Assange is that they make against him is a political argument or an opinion, and it's actually propaganda. It's that he put, U.S. agents in the field. He put their lives at risk because of the stuff that was published on WikiLeaks. Now, I point out, I hasten to point out to everybody where he worked with the New York Times, with their journalists, with The Guardian, with Le Monde, I think El País, possibly in Spain. It was all part of a consortium to release and to manage the release of this information. The one who basically put everybody at risk was a Guardian journalist named Luke Harding, who published a book regarding Cablegate. And in the book, he put the password to the encrypted files that basically allow people to get in when that book was published. And it wasn't until Assange and WikiLeaks team were basically alerted about this, then they got on the phone to the State Department and said, hey, this book is out and this is compromising. If you have anybody in the field, you better get in touch with them. And nobody, to their knowledge, was hurt or killed or put in danger. So he did the responsible thing as a journalist. Right. It was the mainstream rogue, propagandist Luke Harding that put people's lives at risk, and he should be in the dock, if anybody, and not Julian Assange. And as you said, what WikiLeaks publishes is very much in the public interest, very much in the public interest. But they're trying to wind back that concept, Freddie. There's no such thing as the public interest anymore, because it's not in the interest of power. Ergo, it's no longer in the public interest, says the establishment.
Yeah, exactly. It's about, leveraging their interest against your interest, and if their interest is more important than your interest, then here goes your freedom of speech and your journalistic rights. So it's disgusting. I mean, it's for everybody to see. But what really amazed me is that they have absolutely no shame. They can conduct that. Prosecutors was asking for another 62-month as part of the plea agreement, but thanks God he already served 5 years in Belmarsh. So that you don't have to serve that. Otherwise, you will have had to serve that again. So all that for me is like, this is harassment. This is really a level of harassment of an individual simply for publishing something. Comes directly from a vetted source, and that is not for Julian to kind of take the responsibility in any way to have any liability as far as publishing this information, because it comes directly from a military operative. So as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing really legal in that instance. But as you say, a lot of propaganda, a lot of PR went into that. It's basically the US putting its muscles and trying to scare everybody. But we're not scared. We're not impressed. We're happy that Julian is out, and the fight continues. We're not gonna give up, because there's a lot more to talk about. We'll talk about it today as well, about Sevastopol, I suppose, and we'll see again what's going on, and we're going to be absolutely amazed about how this is all articulated and how this is all put together.
Last thing I'll say on the Assange story, Freddie, is we commented on this yesterday with Basil Valentine and Taylor Hudak on the show. And, Julian was very powerful, and he was absolutely wreaking havoc on Twitter before they took him away. And they shut his Twitter account, or he was off social media at that point. But he was absolutely savaging the British government over this Skripal farrago. That's a complete pantomime of an event. The Novichok crisis. So he was really, really making an impact. Now, if he ever returns to X or Twitter, and by the way, I'm gonna put my money down now. The first interview he's gonna give, I think it has to be Tucker Carlson.
Yeah,
I'm gonna put the money on the table. It's Tucker. I'll bet you Tucker's even in Australia as we speak, probably lining that one up. So that's gonna happen. And if he gets on social media, Freddie, what kind of he's gonna be the biggest account on Twitter. There's nobody. He's gonna be bigger than Trump. Freddie, what do you think?
Gonna be a bit bigger than Elon Musk.
Yeah. Yep.
No, look, he's already he's a living legend. This is really rare. He's one of a kind. But yeah, this is going to be very interesting to have this. Hopefully, they'll deliver it on Twitter as well. So really get a good reach, so that everybody can understand how he feels. It's not about having the full story, but really understand, what he's learned. Because when you spend so much time on solitary confinement, you dig inside, you're going to go have that journey inside yourself, and you're going to really, really explore all the avenues and trying to understand really what does it mean, what this fight really means, not only for him, but for the world. Because I think the fight that is conducted is a fight for humanity, even beyond journalism. This is about, the United States hegemon that is trying to tell us how we should think, what should we do, what is possible, what is not possible. And this really been repeated around the world, in the Western countries and other countries as well, where more and more our liberties are being attacked upon, that have been basically diminished, and less constitutional right is appreciated and offered to citizens, which really explain the frustrations that we are seeing in the Western world at the moment. And this is only going to go and increase, more events like that occur, more justice happens, and more frustrations will be liberated, until the government understand that at the end of the day, the power is with us. It's not with them. They work for us. That's what's really important. And journalism is there to maintain a balance, fair balance, so that people can actually access the truth. But we've been offered the mainstream media. Nobody forces anyone to watch the mainstream media. That's what I say. Anybody that say I'm not informed because the mainstream media is lying to me, nobody forces you watching the mainstream media. Go and look for people that actually do the homework, people like yourself and so many out there that actually spend of their own time. They're not getting rich at doing it. We all know that. But at least we're doing something that is of public utility, and we hope we make a difference. And that's where the information should be going, because MCM is not interested in giving us the truth.
Yeah, we do what we can with the resources we have, Freddie. We do the best we can with what we've got. And if all we've got is our voice and our brain, then so be it. We'll use that in whatever platforms that we can possibly use, like TNT. Today's News Talk has been a great platform for The Truth, as well as 21st Century Wire and countless other independent media outlets. Freddie, you're absolutely spot on right there. Before the break, we mentioned Ukraine, Sevastopol, Crimea over the weekend. I mean, that's a huge story. Not only that, you got these really shady terrorist attacks, Gladio-style attacks in Dagestan that looked like a way to paper over the real story, which of course was in Crimea. Really horrific at a time when people are talking about a negotiated settlement. The timing of that, of course, is no coincidence. It seems that, Freddie, there's some people that don't want a negotiated settlement. So I think there's a split in the establishment a little bit. There's people that want to back out of this thing, and there's other people in other agencies that want to move ahead and escalate. Just first of all, your reaction to the horrific scenes that we saw in Sevastopol.
Yeah, absolutely disgusting. I mean, 5 individuals, kids, 2 children's been killed, 155 people basically injured by shrapnel. And we're told a story that this was basically these people got caught in a crossfiring, by the United States and John Kirby. So again, what we are saying here is a manufactured lie to trying to get away from a situation that turned out to go pretty wrong. And this operation was I think, a catastrophe, to be honest with you. And more importantly, there is absolutely unequivocal. All the data shows that this was a target on the city of Sevastopol and not on some Belbek airport base or whatever. This was not the case. This was clearly an attack during a very important Christian Orthodox holiday in Sevastopol. And I think that the Russians have literally escaped from a major catastrophe, because if those missiles, I think it was 5 missiles that were fired on Crimea, on Sevastopol, and if that has landed in the middle of Sevastopol, I think we would have talking about a lot of casualties. So I'm glad this was averted, but very clearly, and I'll go very straight because I want to address the point about the context and what is it that we are looking at, because this is part of a much bigger picture, and I think it's important to describe it. So we can clearly see that the NATO apparatus, the United States apparatus, is extremely active in this kind of operation. They provide the logistic. Anything that use GPS automatically links back to the United States. In this particular case, the Russians are very clear about it. This was supported by experts in attack MAS missile, which was the missile used for this operation. We can see the use of cluster ammunition, which clearly, I think is the M75 cluster ammunition. This is absolutely forbidden in war times, especially against civilians. But of course, the United States is not participating in this kind of agreement or treaty. And then on the other side, what's very important to see is obviously the initial reaction from the Ukrainians, who's going to blame the Russians for trying to defend themselves. And they're attacking basically Crimea, that Crimea is still Ukrainians. And the United States is looking basically at a terrorist attack and not even saying a word. So that's really worrying. But what's really important here, Patrick, is to understand really how this comes about. And the question that needs to be answered now is under which framework these operations are conducted and where these repetitive terror attacks are coming from. Now, I've done some research, as you know, on the Nord Stream pipeline on NATO for quite some time. And what my investigation revealed in Ukraine is interesting, because we got to go back and rewind a little bit to the 2017 National Security Strategy, the NDS of the United States. It's got a lot of brainstorming about reshuffling the cards on where this new national security strategy is going to lead the United States intelligence community and defense community. And then part of this brainstorming comes to 2018 as the final product, where clearly we can see in the irregular warfare annex attached to the NDS that the United States, with all the lessons they learned from the war on terrorism, the war on terrors, the so-called war on terror, all the lessons learned, everything that they've done was basically shifted. And the irregular warfare annex is absolutely unequivocal. They clearly talk about a shift towards basically a new enemy, what they call a near peer adversary or peer adversary, and it's clearly China and especially Russia. So we're talking about 2018. We're not in 23 and 22. This is not about, Russia might invade Ukraine or not. This is really part of a global strategy. And what is interesting in that is to understand that there is a framework. And that's really interesting to understand that, because whether you talk about the Nord Stream sabotage or to talk about the various terrorist attacks that have happened in Belgorod, in Russia itself, it's all part of the same construct. And this construct, we can actually see it and we can recognize it. Now, what I'm going to discuss now is probably people have few people have understand it or even researched it, but it's very interesting. It's about the U.S. Department of Defense, and over the years they have developed two doctrines, and these doctrines are known as operational preparation of the environment. Okay, it's known as OPE. And when joint intelligence, basically operatives are part of this intelligence operations, it is known as GIOP, which is Joint Operational Preparation of the Environment. Now, that is very interesting because these are basically classified and categorized as traditional military activities. The reason why they are categorized as traditional military activities is because they simply help bypassing basically the notification process to the Congress and the House, and they barely basically make it to the Oversight, Intelligence and Defense Committee, which normally look into this kind of operation. So whether we're talking about OPE or we're talking about GIOPE, these doctrines, which have no status, basically, allowed basically something that is purely an intelligence operation or considered as a covert operation, a clandestine operation, being disguised as an OPE, and to avoid and bypass the oversight process. And that is basically the doctrine, that is basically the program, the unacknowledged program that is deployed abroad, whether through NATO, the glove of NATO, or the glove of Ukraine. So if they're going to work on an operation with the intelligence in Ukraine, the United States Department of Defense are going to use these particular doctrines, the OPE or GIOPE, to insert themselves into the Ukrainian glove, working with the Ukrainian intelligence to carry out what is known as irregular warfare, which is basically falling under the unconventional warfare. And what you find in this umbrella is sabotage and act of terrorism. So this is where we're going with this new strategy, and this has been going on for 2018. So when we're talking about an operation like we saw in Sevastopol, this is a GIOPE. This is a Joint Intelligence Operational Preparation of the environment, meaning the environment, this is all setting up all the conditions for a military operation and a major military operation, which means that it involves collections of evidence, a lot of data, whether this is space data, which is locative data. This is about using informants within the countries, using sleeping terrorist cells inside the country. We saw in Dagestan, in simultaneous, at the same time this is happening in Sevastopol, you get these cells that basically starting to come out in Dagestan and starting to kill people, attacking churches, Orthodox, Jewish synagogues, attacking basically police stations, slitting the throats of the priests. All that is part of a covert operation or clandestine operation behind enemy lines. And the only process and only doctrines and only program, unacknowledged program that we can identify that can bypass basically the oversight committees are the OP or the GIOP. And that's exactly what I wanted to say today, because I think when you understand that, it's going to help us understand that we're only seeing the beginning of these various irregular warfare activities taking place on Russian soil.
Okay, so asymmetric warfare, hybrid warfare, total warfare, irregular warfare, lots of different terms that are used to describe this. So basically what you're saying is, all rules are suspended, all is fair in love and war. And certainly this is what we're seeing, these terrorist attacks, shades of Operation Gladio, those horrific decades in Europe where NATO intelligence was staging terrorist attacks throughout the continent. I'm talking about the 50s, late 50s, even 60s, 70s, and of course 80s, culminating with the Bologna bombing that killed so many different people there turned out to be Operation Gladios, done by NATO against European citizens. Nobody's ever been held to account for that. But now we find out through peer-reviewed work, the great work of Daniel Ganser and other great academics and journalists, that this is exactly what happened. CIA had an autonomous cell within NATO that was only answerable to itself. In fact, NATO command didn't even know about it. Most of them didn't even know it existed. And yet all of these activities, these terrorist attacks, were being staged right across Europe, a strategy of tension. And that's exactly, I think, what we're seeing happening in Russia now with the Crocus City Hall attack, which was in March, and also in Dagestan here. There's other events that we could put in that category too, Freddie. So basically, they're playing dirty. They're playing dirty by all means necessary. But what is the objective, Freddie? Besides tension, to keep the war going? It just fits Gladio chapter and verse, but they've just rebranded it now, calling it, total warfare, hybrid warfare, irregular warfare. So it's incredible.
Well, what people call the Gladio B, which really pretty much, a desk at USOCOM, which basically work alongside the CIA, is allowed himself to conduct and using NATO as a glove to insert unconventional warfare programs. So these programs are unacknowledged and they intensify depending on how well they're doing. So if, for example, they're losing the battle with Ukraine against Russia, and clearly they're not able to respond because the manufacturing of ammunitions of 155 shells and so on is replaced by different other cluster munitions and so on. Clearly, we can see that the United States and NATO cannot respond to the intensity of warfare going on in Ukraine at the moment. So what they do is to compensate that, they use this form of unconventional warfare and irregular warfare, and that's when you start to see sabotage, and act of terrorism. So act of terrorism that contracted via various cells. We know in Dagestan, Al-Qaeda is there, ISIS is there, and of course CIA and MI6 is definitely, one phone call away. So this is about destabilizing the country. This is about weakening Russia from inside. And unfortunately, what we can see is that it's strengthening Russia. The people are so infuriated about what happened in Sevastopol that they are asking their government, and telling them this is, crossing the Rubicon. This is about crossing the red line now. What are you going to do about it? And that's why you got Sergei Lavrov coming with a statement saying, look, this is not going to be remain unanswered. We're going to go after you, and we're going to come after U.S. personnel and assets in Ukraine. I don't think they're going to go for Romania or Poland, but they'll definitely go for assets in Ukraine, especially those that targets that logistic, that unconventional warfare logistics that you're going to see with special operators, and those that provide that GPS logistic for the special operation. And then the second part we should anticipate as well is the possibility that Russia might decide to close at least some parts of the Black Sea airspace as well, because there's been just so many provocations. We don't hear all of it, but there's a lot of provocation with B-52. You get a lot of jet fighters, US, NATO, that basically comes at the border, circling the border of Russia. And this has been a provocation that has been ongoing for years. So I think that Russia is going to put an end to that. And I think we're going to see a serious, proportionate, but a very serious answers from the Russian Federation, because that Sevastopol attack is absolutely disgusting.
Yeah. Yeah, we also have just quickly the announcement from the U.S. That they'll be deploying military contractors now openly in Ukraine. So you're talking about the Blackwater type firms, private military firms. So I mean, this is a huge escalation, and they're not going to be spared, obviously, by the hands of Russian Kinshall missiles and so forth. But it just shows you the privatization of the military and creating a privatized arm to bypass any sort of restraint that they might have regarding international law, working around NATO. It's just really just to extend the fact that Ukraine's military is flagging. They're having trouble recruiting troops. I'm going to throw this clip, which is circulating on X right now. This is Ukrainian recruiters going around trying to basically abduct any man with a pulse between the age of 18, if they can find them, and maybe up to 60 years old. I think the average age, we'll bring this clip on screen here, the average age of the Ukrainian conscripts and so forth it's just under 40 years old, Freddie. I mean, this is not look at this. They're just kidnapping this guy. They're fighting back. There's record numbers of incidents of families fighting these recruiters because they're trying to take their breadwinners away and throw them in the trenches in Donbass, Freddie. I mean, this is like happening all the time, all over what is left of Ukraine. This can't be a viable fighting force. Your thoughts, Freddie?
It's just, yeah, well, I mean, that has been, this is desperation. This is what's going on. This is desperation. And as we all know, this is until the last Ukrainian. That's what Zelensky offers to his people. This is not the Ukrainian people that wants that. I think the Ukrainian people are smart people. There is no reason for them to understand that this war has been basically commanded by the United States under the promise that they will win this war and the United States will be there for them. But the bottom line is that the Ukraine and NATO can even not help themselves. How can they help Ukraine? And these kind of actions allowed to happen clearly demonstrate the level of desperation within the governments. What is even more worrying, Patrick, is that the last declaration and statement made by Putin that I came across, I think it was on the 20th of June, when he talks about Zelensky and about his mandate, the illegitimacy of his presidency at this current moment in time. But what he's talking about is that this conflict is going to drag until spring 2025. And that's an important clue as well, because what he's telling us is that this is not the end. We are here in the long game. And if you want to pain, you're going to get pain, but Russia is not going away. And if it's going to go, of course, until spring 2025, then the winter 2024 is going to be a hard one, and it's not going to be a main power to sustain this kind of intensity. And I believe at some stage something is going to explode in Ukraine. The people of Ukraine are going to react at some stage. They cannot carry on like this. They must put an end to that.
And just a couple minutes left, Freddie. I want to get your comment as well. Something a little closer to home for you. Headline: France faces threat of, quote, civil war. And this is something Macron is bandying about. You've probably seen this in the news. Freddie, I know you follow the French press very closely. What's this all about?
Well, that is the promise of chaos that the media in France have kind of starting to build up, the idea of chaos, of, revolution, because this is what has been planned. What has been planned is from the moment that Macron dissolved the National Assembly and called for a snap election, it was very clear in his attitude and decisions that he didn't want anyone to get ready quickly. He wanted to get these very quick elections, get it ready. He knows that he's going to lose these elections. The polls are already showing that he's going to lose it. There might not be a majority for the national rally, but enough for forcing Macron to have to basically finish his mandate under a national rally, strong influence in the National Assembly. So because of that, the globalists, these young global leaders and the European Union, the Van der Leyen Club, is going to push for creating chaos, because this is where these guys thrive. Because when you create chaos, you can use emergency power. All right? And that's where they're going to. They're going to try to grab as much as emergency power, perhaps even for the first time, all the way to the continuity of governments, which give even extra power. So they're going to basically agitate all these, movements of public opinions, and this going to turn eventually into a violent confrontation on the street. There's no doubt about it, because that is the intention. And what we are seeing in the press is the press going to do exactly what they've done for COVID. They're going to inject enough fear and enough, controversy for that people starting to, fight against each other. If they fight against each other, they're not fighting against Macron, and that works fine.
Yeah. And a lot of people are starting to realize here and talk more publicly. I mean, they're a little bit late, Freddie, but basically saying what a toxic individual Emmanuel Macron is and has been. for the political system in France. I mean, they're just talking about that now. I mean, we were covering this for years, in fact, and how dangerous he was with the vaccine rollout. McKinsey Gate, the fact that arguably U.S. intelligence is running a fair share of the French governmental functions. If you talk about McKinsey Gate, and this guy is running around basically like he is the second coming of Napoleon III. So, and he doesn't really want to relinquish power, and we know why, because he was installed for a reason. He was put in by the main central banking powers because he is the guy that was going to bring their football down for a touchdown in the end zone. And that touchdown hadn't quite materialized yet. Nearly there, but not quite. Hence, they're desperate right now. It's going to be very interesting, Freddie. Let's continue this conversation next week. I'm looking forward to that. I hope you're going to stay well. We will see you very soon.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, Patrick.
There he goes, ladies and gentlemen, Freddie Ponton, live and direct from France. Once again, great analysis as usual. Top of the hour news headlines coming up. We're going to break. We'll be back on the other side. We're going to go to South Africa, live and direct with Kim Heller, talk about what's going on there and a lot more. Stay with us.